G'day poker people, welcome back to the vlog. I'm about to head to the Star Casino to play a game of 2-5. Did have a bit of a sleep in, so it's already 8:30 PM, so actually pretty keen to rush over there. We'll probably only get in about 4.5 hours of play since all the tables shut at around 1:30. It's a bit bummed out by that, but really there should be no excuses for me not playing my A-grade game today. Definitely fully rested, I've just had a good feed, and I don't have to focus for too long of a period. So really expecting a lot from myself today. Without any further ado, let's head to the CAS. So after a bit of a sleep in, end up getting into the game at about 9 PM. Unfortunately, we couldn't quite get the straddle going for all of the hands in this vlog, so I think we only have one, 2-5-10, the rest of the hands played as a 2-5, and straight away I noticed there were a lot of multi-way pots, all the opponents were playing pretty passive, which means I'm going to play a pretty tight strategy, pretty tight aggressive strategy against passive opponents, which unfortunately means I have to VPit less than I would like. So aren't a huge amount of hands, but definitely got a few. So without any further ado, let's hop into them. First hand up, I have pocket nines in the hijack. I go ahead and min click open it to 10. The reason I'm using a smaller raising size in this passive game is I just expect to get a lot of cold calls and have to play out of position a lot. And when that's the case, I would rather invest less money out of position. So I open to as small as I possibly can. I make it 10 and then I get a call from the small blind and big blind. So it heads up to a flop. And it's an absolute banger. It is ace-9-3 with 2 clubs. Let's go. We hit middle set. Both the opponents check it over to me. Absolutely. Slam dunk value bet spot here. Having said that, though, it's pretty interesting what sizing I want to use. I really do think there'd be a lot of EV in using a large bet size, something like 30, because I expect both the opponents to have a lot of ace-x hands in their range, which are absolutely going to call at least once on the flop. Maybe the same thing with flush draws. I think they're going to be pretty inelastic as well. Having said that, though, the issue with using that larger bet size with a hand this strong, it's pretty face up, and our opponents might be able to play pretty well against it going on later streets. When I do have a hand like ace-5 suited, for example, or even a bluffing hand, it's going to be more efficient to use a smaller bet size on this board texture. So if we start splitting it between big bets with strong hands, small bets with weak, vulnerable hands, we start to become a bit face up. So I do decide to go ahead and bet 10 for that reason. Maybe I'm overthinking though, and I should just bet for value against passive opponents. The action gets to the small blind, and they go ahead and check raise it to 40. Let's go. We're loving that news. The big blind folds, and I think it's a slam dunk just call. Not only do we have position in the hand, but even if we were out of position, I don't think I would be having a 3-bet range on an ace-9-3 two-tone flop. Good spot to just trap in my opinion. So I throw in the call, and then we're heads up to a turn, and the turn is the repeat 3 of hearts. So we boat up, and we have a flush draw drawing dead. Doesn't stop my opponent from betting. They go ahead and bet 50, and again, I think this is another clear just call spot. I think if my opponent has ace-3 suited or ace-9 suited, then they're probably just going to keep putting money in the pot anyway, as long as the front door flush doesn't get in. But if my opponent was semi-bluffing with a flush draw, we want them to get there now because we have them drawing dead with our full house. So I think it's a good spot to just throw in the call. And this is maybe another position where I wouldn't have a raising range. Maybe there's some utility to do it with hand behind, like a king-high flush draw. We have pocket nines. I think it's a slam dunk spot to just call. Really hoping my opponent gets there with a flush on the river or something. So we see the river, which is a repeat ace, the ace of diamonds. So not the best river in the world for us. We do now lose to those ace-3 suited and ace-9 hands, which is pretty gross, but the opponent goes ahead and checks it over to me, and my initial thought is I just absolutely have to check back here. I think it's very likely my opponent was bluffing with a flush draw, and even if I, bet really small to try to get paid off by king high, like it's going to be so easy for the opponent to put me on an ace-x hand. I think I probably can't get any value from those hands anyway, and there is some risk that we are losing to either quads or ace-3 suited, which the opponent is checking over to me to induce bluffs with and maybe get a check raise paid off if they have quads and I have an ace-x. I go ahead and check it back, and then the opponent shows queen jack of clubs. So let's go. We rake in the first pot of the session. This next hand starts off a bit different. A new player comes in under the gun and they decide to post their blinds, but when they check their cards, they go ahead and open fold. I think they just made a bit of a mistake being new to the game or whatever. But the action folds around to my hijack with 9-8 of diamonds, and usually I would fold this hand in the hijack, particularly when there has been, a poster or a limper. But in this spot, when there's literal like $5 of dead money out there, I'm absolutely going to want to attack that money when I know there's actually no range of hands that can even defend that. So I go ahead and raise it up to 25, and then I get a call from a tight aggressive small blind. We're heads up to a flop of 6-6 deuce rainbow with 1 diamond. The opponent checks it over to me, and this is a pretty interesting spot because I actually think we are going to achieve a lot of fold equity with a bet here. I think the small blind's going to have a bunch of hands like Queen 10 offsuit, 10-9 suited, which we're absolutely going to love folding out when we have 9 high. And this is actually one of the better bluffing hands we can have anyway, just because we have a bunch of backdoor equity to a straight draw and a flush draw, plus the trash showdown value with 9 high. So I go ahead and bet 30, then the small blind doesn't take too long before throwing in the call. So we're still heads up to a turn. The turn's a pretty sexy one. It is the 7 of diamonds, giving us a straight flush draw. So absolutely massive turn for us. The opponent checks it over to me again, and with a hand with this much equity, I think it's a slam dunk bet spot as a semi bluff. Having said that though, this is a spot where I'm going to want to bluff a bit more conservatively, just because I think when the opponent cold calls on the flop, they're going to have a lot of pocket pairs in their range and some 6x hands. So getting a fold here might be a bit more difficult. But when we have like the nut semi bluffing hand, it's almost a value bet, to be honest. When we have this much equity, I think it's a great spot to go ahead and bet anyway, really just trying to represent those stronger over pairs, aces, kings, queens, etc. So I go ahead and bet 80, and then the small blind starts to like stare me down, and they give me a bit of a side eye, like they're a bit skeptical that this is a value bet or something, but eventually they do land on a fold there. So yet again, raking in another pot. What a beautiful turn for us. Next hand, one of the passive players opens under the gun, then a tight aggressive low jack calls, and I'm on the button with ace-8 of spades, and I decide to overcall here. And I think against a passive under the gun opening range, I definitely wouldn't want to 3-bet this hand, and I think folding would be a bit too tight when we have the button. I definitely love playing my button and having position on the field, but also ace-8 suited is one of the better hands to play in a multi-way pot, just because you're going to flush over flush people more than when you have any other suited combination of hands. So I throw in the call, and then we go 3 ways to a flop. Ace King 7 with 2 diamonds. The under the gun player goes ahead and c-bets 20. The low jack folds, and the action's on me, and I think we have a pretty easy call here. Definitely concerned we lose to a stronger ace X hand, but we're not giving up to just one straight. Come on, particularly in position. So I throw in the call, and then we get to see the turn, which is the 10 of hearts putting out backdoor hearts. And the opponent keeps betting at it. They go ahead and make it 55. So now here's where things start to get a bit dicey. Still worried we lose to all the stronger ace X hands. There's loads of 2 pairs my opponent could have now. I really think they are going to be c-betting pretty wide. So even if they had a hand like King 10 suited or pocket 10s, I wouldn't be shocked. Having said that though, if they do have a hands like 9-8 suited, 10-9 suited, or even some of those pocket pairs like 9s, 8s or 7s, it wouldn't shock me if they started to turn those hands into a bluff on this turn, when they're going to know that their range looks really, really strong on this board, and my range is just going to have a lot of these weaker ace-X hands and some pocket pairs as well that are going to be put in a pretty tough spot if they continue to barrel. So on one hand, I'm worried that I'll lose, but also it's a really good spot for my opponent to bluff, so I definitely do want to defend with some of my ace-X hands, and whilst I do think ace-queen and ace-jack would make better defense, it's a bit borderline, but I don't really know much about this opponent. I'll sort of shrug my shoulders and throw in the call. So it heads up to a river, which is the 5 of diamonds. Now the opponent hits a tank, and they're in there probably like 15 seconds before checking it over to me, and I snap check back. I'm absolutely loving that I get to show down for free here. Then the opponent turns over 6-5 suited. So there you go, they did have an absolute airball bluff on the turn, and then when they river the pair, they considered continuing to bluff with it, but I'm pretty fortunate I did, because I think I would have laid this down on the river and I would have ended up folding the better hand. The next hand's the only 2-5-10 hand we played during this session, and I'm in the cutoff with pocket 7s. I go ahead and open it up to 25, and then I get a call from the big blind as well as the straddle. So we go 3 ways to a flop of ace-6 rainbow. The action checks to me, and I consider having a range bet on this board. I think pocket 7 specifically would benefit from a bit of equity denial. I'm definitely concerned that either of the opponents could have a bunch of offsuit ace-X combinations, and betting into 2 people can be dicey because of that. So I do just like to check back here. I wouldn't hate c-betting though. So we get to see a free turn, which is the queen of diamonds putting in backdoor diamonds. The big blind checks, and then the straddle goes ahead and bets 20. My opponent's bet less than 1/3 of the pot. I'm definitely concerned that they could have an ace-x hand, or they're betting a queen. I do think they're going to have a lot of stuff like flush draws and straight draws in their range as well. And when we're getting this good of a price to call, I still think it might be a fold, just because you've got to worry about the big blind overcalling. I get tempted and I do throw in the call. Maybe a mistake though, and then the big blind folds. So we're heads up to the river, which is the 10 of hearts, and then my opponent keeps betting at it. They go ahead and make it 25, and it's a pretty gross spot. The opponent has bet so small, and we're getting better than 5-1 on a call. Having said that though, like, what do we beat? Some of the like semi-bluff gut shots and flush draws I now lose to, because they might have, 10-9 of diamonds, king 10 offsuit, all draws that potentially got there now. But the price is so good, and we do beat some of the diamond draws that miss, especially considering we don't have the 7 of diamonds ourselves. So, I mean, I actually did consider bluff raising even at a point, but I just don't think that would work. I think maybe I'd be able to get them to fold at 10, but I think a queen's always going to call. Like, how often are they going to buy that I checked an ace back on the flop? Like, I think it might be pretty face up as a bluff if I did raise, so I don't expect it to work that often, particularly against passive opponents, and I really don't want to fold getting this good of a prize, but maybe that is the best play despite that. So I did end up throwing in the calls, and then my opponent shows me queen 9 offsuit. So Merry Christmas, please spend the $25 wisely. Next up, I'm in the low jack with pocket kings. Let's go. I raise it up to 10. I get a call from the cut off the button. And the action's round to a tight aggressive big blind. They go ahead and 3-bet it to 50. The opponent only started the hand with 400, so I do consider going all in for a moment here, but I think that sizing will be way too big, and it definitely could induce hero folds from ace queen and pocket jack. So I'd rather use a more conventional 2.2x sizing with my 4-bet. Just get some more value, keep those hands in, and balance it out when I do want to have some bluffs and get a cheaper price on it. So I go ahead and raise it to 110, then the cutoff from the button fold, and the actions ran to the big blind, and they take maybe 15 seconds before throwing in the call. So it heads up to a flop of 5-3 deuce rainbow. The opponent checks it over to me, and again, I consider going all in here. The SPR is only 1.5, and I do think that most opponents in a live 2-5 game are going to snap call with like queens through 10s if I do shove it here. So there's definitely going to be EV in using that size. Having said that though, that would be a very unbalanced approach to take. Like if I have ace king or king queen suited, something I 4-bet bluffed with, I probably wouldn't ever just rip it all in, just because I think I'm going to be able to fold out some of my opponent's ace-x hands for a much cheaper price. If I'm going to bet smaller with my bluffs, I definitely want to balance it out when I do have what is effectively the nuts with pocket kings. So I go ahead and c-bet 50, and then the actions on my opponent, and they're in the tank probably like a good 30 seconds. They start shuffling their cards back and forth, and they say to me, "Oh, do you have ace king? I really think you have ace king." And then they end up folding their hand. So I guess they had a hand that lost to ace king anyway, so maybe not that much value for us to get here, particularly if they're not calling this small of a bet. So we were going to rake in this pot anyway. But then the opponent to my left, who I had a bit of a rapport with, they've been very talkative at the table in general. They're like, "I know you had ace king there. 100% I know you had ace king there. If you had aces or kings, you would have just been all in on the flop, no second thought. I just know you were trying to bluff with ace king." So when you do take a more balanced approach with certain parts of your range, particularly in live poker, I think people might interpret it the wrong way, which is always something interesting to keep in mind with live poker. So we've got one last interesting hand from the session. It occurred at about 1:15, and the staff had already been around and said we're going to call the last 3 hands at 1:30. And I'm like, oh crap, I don't have enough hands for the vlog. And then I'm under the gun 8-handed with ace-10 offsuit. 10 usually would be a fold under the gun 8-handed, but I need hands for the vlog, and against a bunch of passive opponents, I'm sure it's not that much of a mistake to open it. So I go ahead and raise it up to 10, and then I get 6 different callers, which really goes to show when you do set a time limit on games and people know that the poker session's about to end, they try and VP a lot. So we go 7 different ways to a flop of 10-6-4 with 2 spades. The action checks to me, and there is like no way I'm going to bet top pair into 6 different opponents. So I go ahead and check it, and then a loose aggressive hijack goes ahead and bets 25. They get a call from cutoff the button. So I really don't think I can go anywhere with top pair top kicker. I throw in the call, and then we are still 4 ways to a turn, which is the 4 of clubs, backdoor clubs, and a repeat of bottom pair. I go ahead and check it over, and then the hijack goes ahead and bets 100 this time. Then both the cutoff and the button fold. Pretty gross spot here. Like I said, definitely concerned I do lose to 2 pairs, and now I guess I lose to trips if the opponent did bet bottom pair into 6 people, which honestly wouldn't totally shock me. Definitely lose to a lot of stuff. Having said that though, getting 2.6 to 1 on a call against an opponent that I think has a lot of crazy bluffs in their range, I really don't think I can be folding a hand this strong. They have semi-bluffs, backdoor clubs, as well as front door spades, and even if they were betting Jack 10 or King 10 for value here, really wouldn't shock me that much. And the other beautiful thing about the bottom pair pairing on the turn, it does block some of my opponent's sets and 2-pair combinations. I really think this is a good spot to continue calling. I throw in the call, and then we're heads up to the river, which is the 7 of spades. Ugh, absolutely gross river. The front door flush gets in, and I go ahead and check it over to my opponent, really hoping to get to showdown at this point. And then my opponent's in the tank, and they probably tank a good 15 seconds before checking it back. That's what we like to see. I turn over my ace 10, and then the opponent shows me 8-6 offsuit. They were betting middle pair into 6 different people, and my read that they were just betting really aggressively was correct, and we were able to break in this pot as a result. Not a bad way to wrap up the session. So after only about 4 hours and a half, 15 minutes-ish of play, those were the most interesting hands we got in the session. And in terms of how I feel about my play this session, I'm going to give myself the A grade. It's a bit of a tentative A grade because, like I said, it's much easier to play A grade for only like 4 hours as opposed to 8 hours. So if I'm going to downgrade myself for anything, maybe sleeping in and losing a bit of volume, but really can't knock my play too much. If I did make any mistakes, maybe I lost a bit of EV by only betting like 1/3 of the pot with middle set. Maybe there's more EV in potting it, but I really don't know because my opponent check raises a semi-bluff. Maybe they don't do that against a pot size bet. It's so impossible to tell, and maybe I can make the laydown with the pocket sevens when my opponent bet really small, but if those are the biggest mistakes I'm making in the session, which might not even be mistakes at all, I have to give myself the A grade. Really happy with my performance. Just wish it would have been a bit longer is the only critique I really have. That's how I feel about my play this session. In terms of the results from this session, ended up buying into the game for 1,000 and cashing out for 1,383. So very decent profit on the session, especially considering this was only a 2-5 game, not a 2-5-10 game. I'll definitely take it for one night's work. So this was pretty much the final session I played whilst I was in Sydney, and like I did with the Gold Coast trip, I really wanted to go over some of the numbers and figure out how much did I actually make from this trip. Well, all of the costs combined, including my flights, accommodation and Ubers, which I really only used Ubers to get from the airport to the hotel, considering I didn't do much else in Sydney except for play poker. The expenses added up to 940.77 for the 4 days I was up there, and with all the profit I made playing poker, ended up being 3,467, which means I made 2,526.23 on the trip, which is definitely not bad at all for 4 days work, and definitely tempts me to go back to Sydney as soon as possible. I've actually got plans to go to Adelaide pretty soon, so I might do that before I head back to Sydney, but really enjoyed Sydney when I was there. I love how there was like 20 tables, all of 2-5 and some 2-5-10 of course as well, which is just a crazy amount of action going on in Sydney at the moment. And yeah, I would love to be there and grind as much as I possibly can, but I think I'll go check out Adelaide first. I'm already chomping at the bit to get back to Sydney as soon as possible. That's going to wrap it up for today. Thanks for sticking all the way to the end of the vlog. That really helps my channel's analytics, and I do appreciate it. If you haven't already, hop in the comments below. Give me some feedback on these individual hand histories. Do you think I played a bit worse than I was making out? Do I not deserve that A grade over such a short session, considering maybe I did make some mistakes? Hop in the comments below. Let me know what you think those mistakes were. But for now, I'm out of here. Peace.